Last year, I headed into the San Bernardino Mountains for a quick backpacking trip, and I made a classic, simple mistake. I didn't check the recent trail conditions. On the map, everything looked perfect, but once I actually got out there, I ran into some sections of downed trees. Some parts were just a slow crawl, others were honestly a little dangerous to navigate. It wasn't that I had the wrong gear. I just hadn't looked at the right information before I left the house. On another trip, I knew high winds were coming and I actually prepared for it. I had my layers, my heavy-duty stakes, and my guideline system was dialed in perfectly. What I didn't think about was the dust. By the end of the first day, the wind had blown so much grit into my tent zipper that it was completely jammed. I spent the rest of that trip awkwardly climbing in and out through a half-open door. Both of those problems had a fix. I just hadn't thought one level further ahead. That's usually what preparation mistakes look like for me. They aren't dramatic, catastrophic failures, just small decisions that felt complete at the time, but weren't. Over time, I've built a process that I go through before every single trip now. Not to make things perfect, but to remove the small problems that just don't need to happen. One thing that really shifted my perspective is realizing that preparation isn't just about packing. Packing is just the last step. True preparation is everything that happens before the bag even comes out. It's about reducing the unknowns and removing the decisions you'd otherwise have to make when you're already exhausted on the trail. It's about building in a margin of error when things go sideways. And honestly, spreading it out over the weeks before a trip, instead of doing everything in a rush the night before, has probably reduced more mistakes than anything else I've changed. About 2 weeks out, I start just paying attention. I'm looking at weather patterns, not obsessively checking the forecast yet, but getting a feel for the systems moving in. This is also when I look at recent trail reports for things like snow levels, water availability, or anything unusual. Nothing is locked in yet. I'm just building a mental picture. I also start thinking about my exit options. If my mood, my energy, or the weather shifts, how easily can I shorten the trip or get out a different way? I rarely ever need to use these bailout routes, but just knowing they exist removes a specific kind of pressure before I even start. A week out is when things get concrete. This is when I customize my gear list. I have a master list, but I tweak it based on where I'm going. A canoe trip looks very different from a high Sierra trek or a winter snowshoe trip. Elevation, temperature, and length, they all change what goes into the pack. I also handle permits now. Getting them approved and printed early just removes one more last-minute variable. And finally, I share my plan with a couple of people, my route, my timing, and emergency numbers for the local rangers in case I don't check back in when I'm supposed to. It takes 10 minutes, and it always gives me a peace of mind. Around this time, I build my route in my offline maps. I draw the trail and mark out possible camp spots. It's not that I expect to get lost. I just don't want to be making navigation choices when I'm tired. That saved me more than once. I've had trips where I took a wrong turn at a junction, walked for a few minutes, and then checked the map to see I'd missed my path. Without that route already drawn, I probably would have gone much further before noticing. Building the route also gives me a reality check on the numbers, the distance and the elevation gain. Last fall, I had a camp spot in mind that seemed fine in theory. But once I saw the actual elevation profile, I realized it wasn't realistic given how my knees have been feeling. The map usually tells the truth better than my expectations do. I download everything before I leave: maps, routes, satellite views. I never depend on having a signal out there. I also look at where I can realistically filter water, the distance between sources, and the expected heat. That tells me exactly how much carry capacity I need, so I'm not just guessing. I'd always rather carry a little extra weight than run tight on a dry stretch. I mark these spots on the map so I don't miss them. I've actually put this whole water flow structure into a field guide link below if you want to see how I map it out. This is the technical check. I charge the power banks, headlamps, and my satellite communicator. I test the stove, the filter, and the shelter. Trips used to be the place where I discovered problems. I once took a brand new sleeping pad on a trip without testing it, and I couldn't figure out how to inflate it at camp. I actually had to dig the instructions out of the bag and read them to sort it out. It was an easy fix, but one I should have handled at home. I also do a final check on the driving route and the trail weather to see if anything has shifted. The trip really starts with the drive, so I make sure the car is ready. Fuel, road access info, and the parking situation. Arriving stressed or scrambling for a spot is a tough way to begin a hike. This is when I finally pack, and I've learned not to rush this anymore. Packing late leads to mistakes. Now I give myself enough time to actually notice when something is missing. When I'm packing, I check off every piece as I put it in the backpack. I also think about accessibility. My shelter, rain gear, warm layers, and headlamp go in the same spot on every single trip. I stopped trying to remember where I put things. I just put them where they belong, so I'm not digging around in the dark. I also stage my food and water. I even put a small post-trip bag in the car with spare clothes, extra water, and a first aid kit with some headache pills. There's nothing worse than a long, thirsty drive home with a headache and no relief. The morning is just a verification. I grab the food from the fridge, do a final weather check, one last walkthrough of the house, and a final checklist scan. I've got so many things this way. Water bottles still in the fridge, or sunglasses left behind. I also make sure to eat and hydrate properly before I leave. I used to skip that, but now I treat the drive as part of the journey, not just the warm-up. Once I'm there, I do a final setup. I check my communication devices, start my tracking, and send out my starting message. Navigation starts recording, the phone goes into airplane mode, and my keys get tucked away somewhere secure. By this point, the decisions are made. I can just focus on being present instead of solving problems I should have handled at home. started writing this whole flow down because I wanted something that I can repeat and refine. I turned it into a short field guide, and it includes the entire timeline, my reliability checks, as well as those small friction points that are so much easier to describe in the document than here in the video. But the part that made the biggest difference for me is the final reliability check. I asked myself two things. First, the weather impact. Not just, will it be cold? But what does that cold mean for my sleep system? High winds mean dust, so how do I protect my zippers? The second is failure scenarios. For every critical system I ask, what's the plan if this doesn't work? If a water source is dry, where is the next one? If my tent pole snaps, or if I forget it entirely, which I've done, can I still rig a shelter? These are just a couple of examples, but more are listed in my guide. A lot of this has become more deliberate for me this year. For those of you following my Sierra Summit attempt, you know the stakes have been a bit higher. These aren't just abstract to-dos anymore. They are checks that keep me safe on serious objectives. Trips feel calmer now. They aren't necessarily easier. The weather still shifts, and the trails still surprise me. But there are fewer moments where an unexpected problem lands on top of a mistake I made at home. I can just be out there. If you want the full structure I use, the field guide is linked below. It's exactly what I use before every trip. Hopefully, it saves you from having to learn some of the lessons the hard way, like I did. And if you want to go one level deeper into the shelter side of preparation, like stakes and anchoring in different conditions, that's what we're covering in the next one.